It's the NFL Trend Zone, and we have rookie minicamps, mostly somewhat in the rear view, and mandatory minicamps start in June, training camp in July, preseason in August. But what we're going to do tonight is dissect some of the AFC stuff and then get into the NFC next week when Cody Spears rejoins us. But I'm going to start with West tonight. We're going to go division by division, good sir. AFC East, I want to know, who do you like to win that division? And if you want to select one of your wild card teams from there, tell us who and tell us why for all of it.
Um, Surprise, surprise to no one. I am banging the drum once again for the Miami Dolphins this year to take the NFC East, AFC East. Sorry. Um, I think that this is the year they finally do it. They came close last year. I think if Tua would have remained healthy throughout the year, they would have had as good a shot as anybody to overtake the Bills. So I do have the Dolphins, um, especially with bringing in Vic Fangio, and he's going to revamp that defense to the Flores level where I believe they'll just be dominant with all the young pieces that they have. So I think South Florida is gonna go nuts next year, and I expect them to take the East. I have one wild card team coming out of the East, and that will be Buffalo. They are still a powerhouse, but they do struggle against the elite comp. Um, Following them, I have the Jets in New England. Jets narrowly missing the playoffs.
Ooh, okay. So on Buffalo, I think I've said this. I think we've said this before on the show that if they don't at least just reach the Super Bowl, they're going to become a joke, like relatively speaking, because every year since 2020, they've been the darling to get past the Chiefs somehow, and they don't. And they're not necessarily a Super Bowl front runner this year. I haven't looked at the odds here in the last week, but I have a firm belief that people are going to get sick of the Bills just not getting there when they have all of the roster tools to get there. So, and this isn't saying that they're not going to or anything like that, but they gotta get there, I think, and at least pose a threat. Get to the AFC Championship, get to the Super Bowl, because if we do this again next year, and we're like, oh yeah, the Bills fell short, they're going to be. It's like it's like the Philadelphia 76ers never
Yeah.
quite get over the hump.
Yeah, I
Jason,
agree.
AFC East, sir, still on the AFC East.
Well, the AFC East is interesting. Well, they're all interesting, just like they are every year at this time. So the Jets, I think, are going to be in a much better position than let's just say the Broncos for last year with the addition of a potential future Hall of Fame quarterback. Now, huge differences between Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to do some good things in New York, and him paired with Hackett, I think, is going to be a tremendous fit. So I think that they're going to be a little bit better than what Wes thinks. So, it's just because I think that the Jets roster overall is more talented, younger than what the Packers had. Maybe I'm wrong. But the Patriots, ooh, man, they still have Mac Jones, don't they?
Yeah, for
They
now, and
do.
it'd be a little bit
Mac
late
Jones.
to get rid of them, even though somebody has hinted that they want to do that.
Well, but he's going to be their starter.
Well, he is right now, but
He
the
is right now.
reports before the draft were that they were disillusioned with him and ready to move on, but then nothing happened. And if you're trading a quarterback now, you're probably just getting a half-ass solution like Bailey Zapp or something as your QB1.
I'd like to see the Patriots do good because I'm a Bill Belichick fan and he needs to get something going there. But now in Miami's situation, I'm going to be very interested to see if they can come out and be as electric as they showed last year at the early parts, with just how Tua and you had Hill and Chase, not Chase but Waddle, how unstoppable they looked. With a whole year of film on Tua, will those deep bombs still be doable? Probably. as far as the Fangio defense is concerned, though, I don't think just by inserting Vic Fangio for year one, that's going to automatically transform that defense into a powerhouse, because I bared witness to what he is on defense, and it takes a good 2 to 3 years for everything to officially be in place, because it's a very complex system. While they'll still hover in the 10 to 15 mark, at least that's what Denver did. Maybe he can have a quicker effect with it in Miami. Same thing happened in Chicago when he was there. It took a few years, and I believe in San Francisco, if you're going back a decade or so. But you're absolutely right. If the Bills don't get they have to get to the Super Bowl. AFC Championship isn't going to be good enough. They have to get to the Super Bowl. If they lose the Super Bowl, then we can restore that hope and potentially keep this preseason prediction of them being a favorite going. But if they don't even get to the Super Bowl, I don't know what they're going to do. So they got a lot of questions to have to answer to themselves. I mean, having a good quarterback such as a Allen, who isn't quite Mahomes and he knows it, man, they're going to be. Oof.
Yeah, one thing that was painstaking for them or their fans was that they looked overmatched against the Bengals. It wasn't like, oh yeah, we just had one bad flip at the ball. They looked like a wild card team compared to the Bengals.
Yeah.
And the Bengals didn't even get to the Super Bowl themselves. So my guess would be if they finish, I think they're going to win the division again. But if they bow out pretty much before the Super Bowl, perhaps for the AFC Championship, that they'll switch head coach in one of those customary, yeah, we got a good head coach, but we need to get over the hump. Kind of like a lot of times you see in the NBA, where great and good head coaches are getting fired just because they're not winning a championship.
Oh, yeah, and McDermott's a great coach.
Yeah. But at some point you have to, I mean, it's happening all over the place in the NBA, actually. Teams that, coaches that would otherwise be salivated over by ordinary teams are getting canned because these teams want to get over the hump and win a championship, not just get to the second round of the playoffs. So I think that will bite McDermott if they don't make any serious noise next year. But I do think the Bills will win the division. I think this is probably the second, maybe second most tricky division in football in terms of head-to-toe competitiveness, and that's only because Belichick coaches a team that I think will be in fourth place, and that's the Patriots. So I have the Bills at about 11-6. I do have the Jets getting into the postseason because I am convinced that marrying Aaron Rodgers with a defensive thinker and Robert Saleh can net positive things. And then I think the Dolphins at about 9-8 in third place, and who knows if they can wiggle into a wild card. But for what I'll have is the Bills win the division and the Jets steal one of the wild cards. And what we always say at this point on the calendar, start looking at teams that will make the postseason that didn't last year, because like clockwork, there's turnover. Half the teams won't make it. And so the Jets will be one of mine for 2023. And that's a pretty fashionable pick because Rodgers plays there now.
And it's crazy how accurate that prediction is, because there was exactly half.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. You would think, and that's why it's so hard when you start making these. If I say, hey boys, go look at the AFC, or next week I say look at the NFC, your natural tendency is to go pick the teams that were just good.
Yeah.
You can't do that because you're going to be wrong. And if you do it, you're just going to be half wrong because the field is always half new. All right. When I did this exercise, Wes, a couple hours ago, I looked at it and started skimming my division winners, and that wasn't too daunting. But when I got to the AFC North, I was like, Jesus, because they're all about the same amount of good after the Bengals, in my opinion. The Steelers have made some moves, and Pickett, to me, looks like he'll be a pretty damn good quarterback. And then Lamar's back, and then the Browns should get a good year from Deshaun Watson. So where did you land on the AFC North pecking order?
Yeah, for the AFC North, and before we delve into that, I do want to just touch on historically about 50% of the playoff teams return year to year. And so with that said, we need to either strike 3 or 4 of last year's playoff teams from the AFC to accommodate the new ones that usually will come in. And that starts first for me in this North Division. I do have Cincy reigning supreme in the division. They've had the cap space. Obviously, it's starting to get eaten up as the years go on. They have the youth. They continue to add around Joe Burrow. And I just feel like they're a team that knows how to win, knows how to play together. They've played in tough games, and I could see them, really challenging Kansas City in the AFC. Um, I have them as my number 2 seed in the AFC this year. Um, Following them, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that a lot of Pittsburgh's additions will lend to them uh, being rejuvenated and revamped. They added Patrick Peterson on the defense, a couple guys in the linebacking core. They didn't necessarily lose too much. They lost Devin Bush and Terrell Edmonds, but I think that those guys can be replaced. And then they followed that up in the draft by adding to and revamping that offense, particularly the offensive line. One of their sneaky draft picks was Darnell Washington, tight end out of Georgia. A lot of people believe that he'll line up as a 6th offensive lineman for them, allowing Pat Fryermuth to do the receiving work from the tight end position. Also love the fact that Pittsburgh wound up with legacy pick with Joey Porter Jr. I think that's just a fantastic story that's going to be talked about throughout the year. For the first playoff team I have missing, or from last year that I have missing is Baltimore. They come in 3rd in the division, and then Cleveland will again come in last place, and it'll likely lead to Kevin Stefanski being let go in the offseason. So that's what I have for the North.
Stefanski or the Browns are so tricky because you think naturally they'd have to improve, but it's like, how are you going to do that in a murderer's row again of AFC North opponents?
And then they're the Browns too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can never. They gave us a little bit of hope that might be done, but no, they're still the Browns.
Yeah. All right, so I can already say that Wes's and I's were the same. I can't. Did you have the Steelers as a wild card team or no?
Yes.
Okay, so do I.
They come in the 7th seed.
Okay, so that's ditto for me on that. So Jason, what's your AFC North order?
Exactly that as well.
Oh, really?
It almost for the same reasons. I mean, Joey Porter. I mean, that is such a great story. I can't quit thinking about that. That is so awesome. But and then the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals. You got to quit. You got to quit counting those guys out. That obviously has to be done. The 2nd seed, they could push for the 1 seed as far as I'm concerned, assuming everybody stays healthy. I mean, they're just continuing to grow together, that young team. But yeah, Pittsburgh I like coming in 2nd. Baltimore, I don't know. It'll be. I'm interested to see what Lamar and Odell can do together, but I've never been as high on Baltimore as most. But good on Lamar for getting his contract, and I don't know how much more years people are going to be willing to give him either. We talked about Buffalo in that same regard. I mean, it feels like we've been having the same conversation about the Ravens for a while too, and primarily due to Lamar Jackson and Lamar Jackson only.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, he inked his deal, and we'll see. But I think it's going to be still a lot of the same.
Notably, the Bengals avoided the Super Bowl runner-up curse. That's a pretty real thing. Just like we talked about half the playoff field turning over each year. Usually, the team that gets to the Super Bowl has a very ho-hum following season, and the Bengals didn't do that. They started out of the gate not really that sizzling in 2022, but I'll be damned if they weren't there close to the end. right before the Super Bowl. So yeah, we have total agreement in what I consider the trickiest division in football to predict because all the teams are just so good. It feels like even though the Browns are going to be in last place, they can't be worse than like 7-10. And so it'll be weird when I put together all of my standings before the season, where I have to pull all those losses or put losses in other places.
Well, it's crazy too. And the last thing I'll say about the Browns is, as I view that team, and I think to myself, just 3 years ago or whatever before the Watson drama started. Yeah, I mean this kid was top 5 quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you're thinking, you get him around, you could build a franchise around this guy, and I don't know if that's true still. Not because of any of the off-field stuff. I'm just saying I didn't watch much of his work last year, I guess. And I don't know if he is the same guy because not only he's obviously still a very gifted athlete, but if you put yourself on a human level and you go through that type of ringer, deserved, undeserved, that's irrelevant. But either way, it's got to be taxing on somebody's emotional well-being and thus affect you in every other which way. So I don't know if we're ever going to get that guy back. Is he strong enough mentally to be able to pull himself up by his bootstraps and get down to football and tune everything out like a Tom Brady could or a Joe Montana could, or you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And he was not good last year. He played 6 games. The Browns were 3-3. He threw 7 touchdown passes, 5 picks, 79.1 passer rating. But the thing is, most people I don't know if they gave him, they assumed there would be a mulligan year because it was a new system. He was suspended for blah, blah, blah games. Nobody thought he would come in and be awesome. I don't think. I certainly didn't. And then when he came, I mean, his completion percentage was 58%, which isn't good anymore in the NFL. So yeah, it was really a patch over year for the Browns, the way they structured his contract, real slimy like.
Well, yeah. And then, and then he inks the big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Good on him or whatever. But you would think that, I guess, if I'm putting myself in his mind, I'm thinking, okay, so now I have to redeem myself and prove that I can be a good investment for this franchise. And by doing that, adding unlimited amounts of pressure upon himself as well, which for some can be a good thing, for others not so much.
Yeah, he's got to do it from 2 angles. He's got to put to rest all of the offseason drama on the field and then prove that he's still a good quarterback, because in his last 22 games since the start of 2020, his teams are 7-15. And so he played wonderfully in 2020, the pandemic season, 4,800 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 picks, and his team was 4-12. And nobody cared because it was like, oh, poor Watson. And then all the nasty stuff broke and he became the villain. So he's got to have redemption on 2 levels, emotionally, personally, and then get back to being a good football player. Thankfully, he's only 27. So he's got all the time in the world to do this. All right.
That's crazy that you just described. Last thing I'll say, that's crazy that you just described that awesome year that he had, but that's just a standard Kirk Cousins year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember actually talking about that, debating people 3 years ago about that. But Deshaun at that point had exceptionalism, because it was like, well, you got to build a team around him for them to get the playoffs. And we're like, yeah, that's what we're trying to tell you. And it's different sets of rules. All right. The AFC South, Wes. Let's see. The Jaguars are the darling because they looked so damn good down the stretch of the season and won a playoff game after coming back from, what was it, 27 points? It felt like a drop in the hat compared to what the Vikings did. But what were they down, 27-0 or something like that?
Yeah.
Yep. And they came back, upended the Chargers because, of course, the Chargers chargered. So Jaguars, Colts, Titans, and Texans. Give it to me, sir.
Yeah, for this one, I have the revamped Indianapolis Colts. seems like they finally have their quarterback of the future. They have a new head coach. They have the all-world backup quarterback Gardner Minshew as a fallback should Anthony Richardson struggle. And then they return a lot of their pieces from the last few years. In my opinion, this team has been, essentially a quarterback away, or at least decent quarterback play away from being able to hang in this division and take this division. This division is kind of low hanging fruit. They are kind of on the come up with Jacksonville and Houston adding some parts over the last few years. Tennessee's kind of faltering their stranglehold that they once had on this division. But I think Indy has enough and has done enough to take this division. So long as Richardson is able to be mistake-free enough. I think the defense is pretty good. They play quick. They play sideline to sideline. And if they're able to do that, they should be able to overcome the second place team I have in that division, which is Jacksonville. I have them also barely missing the playoffs. So that is the second playoff team from last year that will not make it, followed by Tennessee and then Houston. Houston will need a year or two to kind of get going under DeMeco Ryans and all the youth that they have on that roster.
In a point of order there, I'm going to guess that you don't have the Panthers next week win the division. Anthony Richardson would probably win Offensive Rookie of the Year in your scenario, or get damn close to it if he led the Colts to a division title. You think he starts week 1?
All signs are kind of pointing that way. A lot of what I was hearing pre-draft is, Richardson, it's not that he's raw, it's just that he's inexperienced and he needs playing time. And from what I understood, whichever team was going to take him, unless they had a bona fide backup that could, go in there and win a couple games to start the year, that he would be thrust into the starting role. Should he earn it in preseason?
Jason,
Heck
on the Titans, who kind of seem blah to most folks, a lot of like Bleacher Report and those types of sites have nominated Ryan Tannehill as a possible summer cut, because if they cut him this summer, they'll save about $27 million and presumably move on to Will Levis. What is your AFC North or AFC South order?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Wes just said. If Richardson can come in, I think Richardson is being put in a position that most quarterbacks that are fairly highly coveted coming out of the draft, crave. I mean, it's a pretty decent organization, at least it has been the last half decade or so. And they do have a good, solid team. Similar to when the Chiefs took Mahomes. I mean, they had a pretty good team in order, and obviously Mahomes is on a whole nother level. So I'm not comparing the two at all. But I think it's a good situation for a young quarterback to be thrust into. So yes, I would roll with him week 1 and see where it takes me. I think they got enough talent on the team to where it's not going to get too out of hand. But I think it's going to be close between both them and Jacksonville, because I did like what Jacksonville did last year. I think they got some good pieces. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to only get better. So and the Titans are, God, if they cut
Tannehill.
God, Yeah, you just said it, Tannehill. That would make it exciting, and I'd like to see that. I mean, I never thought that they were ever going to get over the hump with him. Really, at the end of the day, I still think he got paid because of Derrick Henry. So we'll see. We'll see there. But then so yeah, I can't choose between the Colts or the Jags. Everything about me wants to pick the Colts, but I'm going to pick the Jags to take that division. And I can't say I don't think gosh dang it. My predictions were so off last year that the Jags and the Colts, I doubt both make the playoffs. The other two teams, I'm leaving out of the playoffs entirely.
So I do not share the enthusiasm about the Colts, at least not this year. I think Richardson's going to take a while to get going. It'd be really cool for his sake if he started, for everybody's sake, starts right away. But I don't think it will mesh instantly. So I have the Jaguars winning again the division, and I think that they'll be quite good because I think we all assumed, and we were all right, Trevor Lawrence is going to turn into when he hits his prime, probably next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, he'll be a top 5 quarterback. And when I look at the rest of the AFC South, I don't see that from anybody else. So I think it will go Jaguars. And then I hate writing the obituary on a Titans team when Vrabel's the coach. Now, that's tricky for me because he always finds a way to make them gritty and competitive. But I will say Jaguars. I guess my dark horse would be DeMeco Ryans really nails it in the first year. Texans, and then the Titans, and then the Colts, who will need a full year to get going with the new setup. And I don't have anybody else in the postseason from that division because I'm gonna pleasantly surprise Jason with my next division for my wild card team. Yep, and I'm gonna be the guy that does it because I needed 3 new playoff teams, and yep, I don't like Sean Payton, but I do trust him to. We'll get there in a second.
Yeah.
AFC West, Wes, what do we got?
Yeah, I think you and I are going to be similar on this one, Dustin. At the top, it's going to be Kansas City, my number 1 seed for the AFC. To quote my favorite TV show, the king stays the king. And they do so by not really moving all that much, by hardly making any moves. Orlando Brown was a tackle that they traded for last offseason. They offered him a contract extension. He kind of turned his nose up at them and thought he was, big hot shit that deserved, even more of a bag than what they were offering. They weren't offering him, pennies on the dollar. They were offering to pay him towards the top of the market. He kind of turned his nose up at them. They let him walk. They bring in Jawan Taylor from Jacksonville. Addition by subtraction there.
Yeah. Just plug and play. We're good.
Plug and play. Yeah. They let Juju walk. I don't really see how letting him walk is necessarily a
bad
negative
thing
for them. No, they bring in
Yeah.
Richie James, who's also a slot receiver, played with the Giants last year, so he can help take some of those receptions. Yeah, I mean they just until somebody proves me or proves us differently, I just think that they should be that team. They should be that team. And following them, I have Denver at the 6th seed.
Both of us,
as you kind of teased before,
Mhm.
Dustin, that Sean Payton seems to get the most out of his teams. And I fully expect them to enter this season, much like we all thought would happen last offseason. For whatever reason, they struggled out the gate. Was it the head coach? Quite possibly. Who's also in New York as the offensive coordinator now. So That's what could be why I have them missing the playoffs. But no, um, Denver, they're young enough. They have players at all the key positions. Um, One thing that I found interesting was the direction that they went in the NFL draft, um, going with receiver with their first pick.
Yeah.
That's I would say the receiver room in Denver is probably one of the strengths of the team, and to add to that, I guess you're adding strength with strength, but you got to wonder if there might be a secondary move there as we enter preseason or something else. So uh, I have the Chargers being my third team that misses the playoffs this year after making it the year before, and Vegas bringing up the rear.
When you said you talked about your favorite show, The King Remains the King, and then you talked about Orlando Brown. Orlando Brown sounds like the name of a character who would be in your favorite show.
Right.
So that,
Exactly.
so that was a nice wire connect. I mean, it's not, but it sounds like it should be.
Yeah.
All right. So on my AFC West order, I do have. So I've said pretty much since I started doing podcasts that my core belief is that until Patrick Mahomes retires, the Chiefs will win the Super Bowl every other year. Because NFL teams don't repeat. I just think for the most part, the Chiefs will win every other year. This time it was every third year. So I do think that even though they'll probably have some goofy little hangover and start 4-3, so we can all freak out about what are they doing here? Then they'll get serious, and boom, at the or the beginning of January, they'll be 12-5 or something like that. But yeah, I'm right there with. I don't know if Jason will be. Jason will probably be the guy that keeps him out of the playoffs. I'm right there with Denver because what I think happened last year is George Payton got to pick Nathaniel Hackett, and he got too cute with that pick. We talked about him getting hoodwinked in the interview, blah, blah, blah. And then I think this time the Walmart board of directors came in and said, we're going to do this the corporate way. We're going to get a guy that we know can win football games. Because even last year, during the worst of the worst with Russell Wilson and all the toilet or the bathroom memes that he had, I never believed that this guy sucked the whole time in Seattle, or it was a mirage, or it was some Pete Carroll voodoo, because it's way too long of a sample size for Russell Wilson to get lucky for 10 years. So I do believe that Sean Payton will squeeze the best out of him. We already know that they've had like a good roster for 3 or 4 years. Somebody just screws it up every year. So I really think that the Broncos have like 10-7 written on them. I haven't looked at their schedule difficulty, but I don't like Sean Payton at all. I can't as a Vikings fan, but I trust him and I trust Russell Wilson. And if this doesn't work, then you can bet Russell Wilson will have some sort of exit strategy before too long. The Chargers, I can see this coming from 18 million miles away. You have Justin Herbert, who is Matthew Stafford reincarnated. Everybody loves him, but nobody will give him heat because he's Justin Herbert. I think the Chargers will, like Wes said, miss the postseason. It'll be the catalyst to Brandon Staley, Alas being fired. It probably should have happened after he collapsed to a 27-0 lead. And then the Raiders just make me laugh because the big solution was to swap Derek Carr for Jimmy Garoppolo. And I will say it 100 times more this summer. It's the Spider-Man meme. And it will never stop being the Spider-Man meme. And the only problem with Garoppolo is he gets hurt. And Derek Carr usually didn't. So, and they didn't even go get Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. It really is that their plan is Garoppolo. And it's Twilight Zone stuff. It's like, oh God, you don't, if the 49ers couldn't win with them, you really think you guys are going to? So I have Chiefs, Broncos is the wild card, Chargers about 8-9, and very clear as day firing Brandon Staley, and then the Raiders at some very Raiders-esque record like 6-11. Jason, AFC West, your specialty.
Well, yeah, we'll start with the Raiders. I mean, so that rationale is probably Josh McDaniels in his mind because he's got ties to Garoppolo before he was, in his infancy when he was with the Patriots. Josh McDaniels, with his ridiculous ego, and it's big, probably thinks, well, the only reason that the 49ers were anything is because of Jimmy G. And he's like, we'll show them. I mean, for Christ's sakes, he traded Jay Cutler for Kyle Orton. Back when Jay Cutler actually had a soul. But yeah, I mean, obviously the Chiefs are taking the division, and I it's that They are so good. I believe. I mean, when you have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes together, that is just an unstoppable force. Now, even in Denver's last 7 dark years, they've played them pretty close each game. But that can be attributed to division games. But they never really stood a chance. I mean, and they're just far superior. Either way, I'm going to the game in Kansas City again, and I'm hoping that we can finally see a win. It's been God, Marquette was 4 last time they won. And I do kind of share the same cautious optimism about Denver, and I would hope that it's the way that everything worked, and it's been admitted by George Payton and a lot of the guys in the building that when Russ got there, I mean, he was entitled to do whatever he wanted. He was encouraged to do whatever he wanted. Hackett admitted that he was going to do whatever Russ wanted. We're going to get him involved. It's all about Russ. It's all about Russ. And Russ is the type of quarterback I found out, and I think, as collectively, we're able to find out that this guy still needs a coach. He is not Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady or somebody else that can come in there and just be them and cover up all the sins on an offense. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, good players still need to be coached. And I think Russ also this didn't get a lot of attention either, is with him losing his mentor, in the off season, had to have probably affected him much more than people want to even lead on. So he's got that going on, and then he gets thrust into an organization where he can do whatever he wants, but he's still kind of looking for the adult in the room, and there was none. And I think Sean Payton can be that guy, a father figure, if you will, like a Pete Carroll was, which you want to do things your way, but you need him. You need that guy. So I think that they're going to be much improved. I certainly hope so. So we'll wait and see. I mean, we could use a good season in Denver. Chargers, I couldn't agree with everything that you guys said more. I mean, Staley should have been gone after this year, especially after that abysmal playoff. Just, man, I can't. And then, but then had he been gone, Sean Payton probably would have taken that job. So. Yeah. I like the way that it all aligned, and but the Chiefs are gonna, take it. Probably they'll be fighting for the number 1, potentially the number 2 seed if the ball bounces the Bengals' way a little bit.
It will be. Wes hinted this, I think, in the middle of the season or maybe towards the end, that it probably was very much that Pete Carroll had a fabulous system for Russell to thrive in. So what I'll say right now is, if Russell Wilson, they arrive in 2023 season again, and he really just isn't it. Doesn't necessarily have to be horrible, but if he just isn't the Seahawks version, it will have turned out that Wes was correct, that it really was a Pete Carroll thing. Because if you go look at Geno Smith's stat line last year, 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 picks. That sounds an awful lot like a Russell Wilson stat line. And we knew that Geno Smith wasn't Russell Wilson heading into last year, and then all of a sudden, he was
turned into him.
Exactly, Russell Wilson. So we need one more year to improve this theory that maybe it was, and then Nathaniel Hackett will feel totally vindicated if Russell struggles again. But it's really weird to think that somehow the Seahawks just slipped in a journeyman quarterback and he had exactly Russell Wilson's numbers. It's like, really?
And the whole time, everybody just assumed that Pete Carroll was a defensive coach. At least I thought he was. It's amazing how that worked. Now, and another thing that I think can be attributed to the Broncos' catastrophic 7 years is the one thing that they were missing. We've spent countless shows, and the national media spent countless times talking about, if they just had a quarterback, if they just had a coach, if they just had an offensive coach, or if they just had that guy, or they were without ownership that whole time. That was And as a fan, I could brush that off and say, yeah, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, they should still be able to go out there and figure it out themselves. But it does. I think it makes a huge difference. I'm so glad, regardless if it proves out this year or not, they finally got competent ownership that proved that they're willing to do what it takes by going out and spending a bunch of money, shoring up the offensive line, obviously. And then he comes out and says, the owners, Penner comes out and says, we're not doing this every year, but we kind of had to this year with our limited number of draft picks. That seems logical to me. I like that because he can at least acknowledge that, no, we're not going to be big spenders every year, but this year we felt it necessary to do so. So competent ownership, which I think that they are, and adult back in the room as a head coach that can be looked at and looked up to by everybody in the building, I think is going to make a world of difference. Might be looking at a completely different team next year.
That's about bloody time.
Let's hope.
Yeah. One other thing on the Seahawks before we wrap up is they are so sold on Geno Smith. They didn't draft a single quarterback. They had an outstanding draft on paper with Devin Witherspoon and Jackson Smith and Jiba. But they didn't even take a 4th, 5th round, 6th round stab on any of those dudes like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Nope, it's just Geno Smith. And so they're probably thinking, like, I can't believe that we just have Russell Wilson again. This works out great.
Yeah.
But for quarterback dollars, they're really not paying him that much. So
no, they gave him a pretty moderate contract.
But it's a big contract, but not in quarterback speak.
Nope.
All right. Well, next week we'll be back on Wednesday to talk about NFC. Actually, we'll probably have to do Tuesday or Thursday because the Lakers play next Wednesday. We'll figure that out on the fly. But Cody will be back, I think, and we'll talk about NFC predictions. Gentlemen, you have a wonderful week. All right.
All right, guys.
Same.
Awesome.